Everyone.
Hmm.
Here we go. 5 o'clock on the dot. Welcome to everyone who is joining us as we officially kick off our Tikkun Zoom Shavuot. My name is Rabbi Susie Jacobson. I am one of the rabbis at Temple Israel in Boston, and this wonderful celebration of our holiday, of our festival, is organized by the Center for Adult Jewish Learning, our home and our hub for Jewish learning throughout the year in every different way. And Shavuot is the holiday where we go big. We have such honor and pride to be hosting this incredible collection of opportunities for studying. We will be studying Torah, we'll be studying Jewish history, we'll be studying politics, we'll be studying art, we'll be studying pop culture. We'll be studying tarot. We have drawn our net very wide and are so incredibly excited to be joining together with 8 different congregations across the country, 11 different Jewish organizations. We have 50 sessions over 26 hours. We are so happy you're here as we kick off, and we're so excited to invite you back for any number of sessions. You will be together in these Zoom rooms. Sometimes there's one or two or even 3 different options per hour. You got an email recently, I hope, that has all of the schedule and the descriptions of the courses. Please feel free to jump into as many as you'd like. I also want to just give you a heads up that um, in that email was something that we at Temple Israel call our How We Engage norms. So Lily's going to throw that up quickly. As we engage across all of these different topics with so many different presenters, we remind ourselves that we're here in order to learn, to be together, to listen, to open ourselves up to new ideas. And we expect that just as with any Jewish community, there's going to be many different opinions, that there are many different perspectives and ideas that are in each of our Zoom rooms. So we ask everyone to engage with love and humility, to listen, to make space, and also to sometimes step forward and share your perspectives. You have this in your email, so you can look at this more fully. And I just want to start again with an enormous thank you to the incredible co-sponsoring organizations. We have such diverse congregations as those in Boston who are there with us, to Stephen Wise Temple in LA and other congregations across the country. We have amazing organizations such as Hebrew College and the Union for Reform Judaism, the Rashi School, and Avodah. And we couldn't do it without the participation of so many. So welcome to everyone. We can take that down, and I just want to finish my welcome by just saying I will thank her many times, but Lily Van Cleve, our program director at Temple Israel, has made all of this happen, along with Emma Glazer, our amazing administrator, who is really holding all this. So we have incredible gratitude to you, Lily, for bringing us together. And with that, we're going to launch into our first session. Welcome, Chag Sameach. I hope everyone here is able to learn something incredible, to surprise themselves with new wisdom, and to perhaps even see some familiar and new faces on your Zoom screen. I'm going to welcome our senior rabbi, Rabbi Elaine Zecker, who's going to be welcoming our first presenter. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Chag Sameach, and thank you for being here right from the very beginning and seeing everyone's face on the screen throughout the way that we teach means so much to all the presenters. I am so thrilled to really start us off by welcoming a dear friend and colleague and someone who brings so much inspiration to the Jewish people and cares so deeply. And Rabbi Rick Jacobs is someone who not only studies and teaches Torah, but he really lives Torah. And I think the essence of Torah is how our intention and our impact and how we regard each other and others with love and compassion and justice. And this is what Rabbi Jacobs lives and breathes in his life, being a congregational rabbi, being the president of the URJ. And I am putting in the chat a description of the Union for Reform Judaism. So if you're not familiar, to become familiar, because it is really such a magnificent organization of which many of the clergy of Temple Israel and many of the clergy who are participating really grew up in the reform movement in all the ways that it brings us together. And so with Rabbi Rick Jacobs here, it is his love for the Jewish people, truly his love for the Jewish people. You have to love the Jewish people sometimes, really. And to be a leader and inspiration throughout the world. And so we're really honored that he is inaugurating these 25 hours of study. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Rick, and just grateful for your presence and all that you do for all of us.
Thank you, Rabbi Zecher, and really Rabbi Jacobson and the whole crew from Temple Israel. Just a blessing to be here. Thank you for not giving me the 3 a.m. slot. It was a kind of a possibility, and I was sort of give me early. I really appreciate this. But in baseball, the leadoff hitter's got to get on base, so I'm going to make sure to really keep my eye on the ball and see if we can together get some runs. I'm coming to you from New York City, and still, the sun is bright, but we got 25 hours of learning ahead of us. And I look forward tonight to unpack some complex and beautiful and transformational teachings from our tradition that are very much a part of Shavuot. So with your permission, I'm going to share my screen. And I hope that you actively use the chat function. We're all super adept at that. You can pose a question. You can, certainly offer an insight. I won't necessarily have my complete attention on the chat, but I'll time to time check there. And I'd love at different points along the way if we can be responding and communicating, whether it's in the chat or maybe in a couple of key moments, we'll be able to open up and let people voice their thoughts. So with that, the Zoom gods are hopefully with us. They're usually pretty good. Just to kind of set forth the two journeys we're going to spend time on tonight are Jethro and Ruth, two remarkable people who are from outside the Jewish tradition, but find their way from a people that each of them come from peoples that are intractable enemies of the Jewish people, but each of them comes to be part of our intimate family. I hope that transformation is something each of us can experience. And please, God, maybe our world just a tiny bit more. Let's start with the bracha. I mean, to study Torah isn't just something we do, it's something we do with sacred intention. So join me from wherever you are. And even if we don't unmute so that we don't have that Zoom chaos, I'm sure the Holy One can hear the prayer however it is recited and wherever it is. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. So I'm going to start with, there's a beautiful book by Rabbi Shai Held, called Judaism is All About Love. Because I think a lot of times we don't actually think Judaism is all about love. And he takes a very familiar teaching and a very familiar refrain, and he kind of busts it open. So I think we're all familiar with this beautiful line from Leviticus, where it says, the stranger who reside with you shall be to you as a citizen. You shall love each of the gerim, the strangers, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I, the Eternal, am your God. And Shai Held's insight is to actually say that in the ancient Near East, it's not unusual to have a reminder about our concern for the widow, the orphan, and the poor. But he says, rarely, if ever, do we find the stranger included in the list outside of the Torah. So that is telling us something pretty important about our tradition and about our obligation and our opportunities. So this idea of stranger, Hebrew ger, we're going to see that transformation from stranger to intimate family is sometimes the move that can happen. And as Shai Held reminds us, it's all about love. I don't know if everyone knows Dr. Adrienne Levine. She's been teaching at HUC in New York after teaching many years at HUC in Los Angeles. She's this brilliant book, Biblical Narratives of Israelites and Their Neighbors. And she also busts open this category about who are the people included in our circle of responsibility. And I think it's really, it's just very powerful. So she's telling us, just the opening line, attitude towards strangers, in this case, the Midianites. Midianites, remember, are arch enemies of the Jewish people. We have that throughout the Bible. And she says that attitudes towards strangers exists on a broad spectrum. They may be critiqued, attacked, brutalized, or praised, respected, and at times quite purposefully included. She says Midianites actually engender both ends of that spectrum. So is it possible that our arch enemies can also be transformed into our intimate circle of community and even family? I think if I just belabor the obvious for one moment, and we thought about the world as it is right now, these feel like very big reaches. We're living in a time anti-Semitism is going the wrong way in terms of the graph. War is still raging in Israel and Gaza. And this idea that enemies can be transformed into not just people who we acknowledge, but even people we can learn from and bring into our family. I think for all of us, that feels a little bit of a big reach, but I'm going to hope that we can actually test whether this, in fact, is a possibility. Okay. I'd love to be able to see a few more of your faces. I'm just going to do a little more of my Zoom magic here. Just get more of your plenums visible so I can actually see you if you look perplexed, or some of you looked completely engaged. But just so hold these thoughts, because Midianites and Moabites are going to be key to our learning. Both are arch enemies in biblical terms, but both have individuals, Jethro and Ruth, who actually transformed from being part of an enemy people into our most profound teachers and even our most inspired leader, who in fact it becomes the ancestor of the Messiah. So here we're just going to dive into Exodus 18. By the way, Revelation at Sinai is a huge part, very often, of Shavuot, what we think about, the idea that the Torah was given on Mount Sinai in some spiritual form, and we receive it over and over again throughout the generations. Before the revelation at Sinai, the big, the thunder and lightning, there's this unbelievable revelation of Moses and his father-in-law. So I like to think of this as the revelation before the revelation. And it's very, very human and very, very beautiful and also challenging to us. So if we just look at this text, it may be familiar as we think about it. So Moses goes out to meet his father-in-law. And I wanted to put color to connect us to how he is referred. When you talk about someone already, father-in-law, sounds like he's already part of the family, which he is. So look at Adrienne Levine's in the blue, again, trying to make it easy to catch it. She says in Exodus 18, the narrator refers to Jethro not as the priest of Midian, but as father-in-law to Moses. The use of the term father-in-law is particularly pronounced in Exodus 18, occurring 13 different times, and that requires an explanation. Father-in-law makes Jethro an insider as well as an outsider. So as we pay attention to who this person is, Jethro, he is in fact Moses' father-in-law, but we'll see in a moment, he's also the priest of Midian. He is the leader of a different religious community. And if that breaks open some narrow places within our hearts and in our interfaith world, that's a good thing. So Moses goes out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed low, kissed him, and they asked after each other's welfare. And Moses then tells him everything that Adonai did to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the plagues, all the hardships, and how Adonai delivered them. What does Jethro do? He rejoices over the kindness that Adonai displayed for Israel, and then he offers a blessing. So Rashi, one of our great biblical commentators, he's trying to find there's got to be something that's more traditional about this. So Rashi says Moses related it to his father-in-law, all that had happened, in order to allure his heart that he might attach himself to the Torah. I mean, Rashi's a good rabbi, right? You got to always figure out, well, this guy was a Midian priest, maybe we can pull him closer and get him into our Torah and into our Jewish circle. But throughout history, that's not necessarily the way we look at Jethro. He's kind of fine the way he is because he seems to know things that even the sage Moses seems not to know. So rather than try and pull him closer, you kind of take a moment, just learn from this very wise individual. Professor Levine has something, I think, remarkable to say about Moses and his relationship to Jethro. He says Moses's actions, rather than his alleged ethnic affiliation, are the chief influence in shaping Jethro's attitude towards him. I'm not just going to stop. I want to see some things in the chat. Here, you guys have been more than prolific here. Look at you. Oh my gosh, look at you. Unbelievable. Let's think this. So the relationship to Moses, who is obviously formerly an Egyptian, now the leader of the Israelites, our ancestors, and Jethro, who's this Midianite priest, they're not known by their ethnic identification, but by how they act. That breaks down all these categories like, oh, you're a Midianite. No, you're a person I relate to. And Moses is seen that way, and Moses sees that way. Does that feel like something that would be profound in our world if we kind of broke down some of those categories we put people in and we see them just for how they act in the world? It's absolutely, it just basically rips open some of these very, I think, limiting ways in which we see the world. And I just love that Professor Levine just kind of in one just very simple way gives us a whole different way to think about it. Look at all these great teachings. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm just gonna, when I can, I'm gonna pull them in, but keep them coming because there's a reason each of you is here so that we can learn from you and with you. So just to kind of finish up here, Rabbi Avadia Sforno, who lived, if you look at his dates, he lived during the Inquisition in Spain. He was in Italy, but he knew a world of a lot of Jew hatred and a lot of danger to the world. And he's wondering what exactly is this interchange between Moses and Jethro. So Avadia Sforno says, he did not rejoice over the destruction of Egypt. That would have been natural, right? Look, basically God destroyed through the plagues and was able to liberate us. That's not what he focuses on. What is the thing that really catches Jethro? He rejoices over the well-being of the Israelites. He behaved like someone whose heart is moved by the tears of the oppressed. So pretty amazing. I mean, you could say, good for you, God. You kind of gave the Egyptians a lot of pushback, but Jethro is a spiritual master. He focuses on the way in which God has caused the Israelites to have this transformational experience. Would that all of us would have that same consciousness. So just to kind of make sure we've got the Midianite thing, because obviously we just talked about Moses' father-in-law Jethro as a Midianite priest. Seems to know a lot about what it means to be a spiritual leader. He tells Moses, he's doing things all wrong. He's going to kill himself, overworking. Rabbi Zecher and colleagues at Temple Israel, a lot of other rabbis. Very often we need a Jethro to tell us the very same thing. But here is the Midianite frame that we don't encounter in Exodus 18, but it's very much present in the biblical literature. So here's this teaching from Numbers 25. It's the Haftarah to Parshat Balak. And it's about Midianites as a source not only of antagonism, but leading the Israelites astray. And it kind of tells you how we're supposed to respond. So it says, just then a certain Israelite man came and brought a Midianite woman over to his companions in the sight of Moses and of the whole Israelite community, who were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, and taking a spear in his hand, he followed the Israelite man into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and the Midianite woman, through the belly. Then the plague against the Israelites was checked. That does not sound like the warm fuzziness of Moses and Jethro at all, but this is a piece of this puzzle. And this is a piece of what it means to say that Jethro is a Midianite priest. Does that mean he is locked into a way of looking at the Israelites and of idolatry? Well, remember Adrian Levine, it's by deeds, not by your ethnic identification. So this is true, but so is the relationship that Moses has with his father-in-law. But it's the backdrop of this transformation that unfolds before us. I am betting there's some really amazing comments landing in the chat. I'm going to just push. Let me do this. Let me just take a quick peek because I know. Yeah, Nancy, thank you for that. The Sephardic experience actually taught the Jews to live with Christians and Muslims, even though things fell apart. Yes. So we do have these experiences, and we're going to kind of zoom in at the end, kind of pull all those facets together, see if transformation actually can be within our grasp. Yeah, and we're also going to talk about immigrants because you can't get very far in this exploration without seeing the demonization as well as the wonderful love that we also are commanded. So let me just get back so I'm going to take us through a typology, 3 different ways that our ancient literature looks at people who are not Jewish, from fear to care to equality. These are not simple things, and they don't happen necessarily sequentially. But this first teaching is from the Babylonian Talmud, and it's pretty stark, the view of a non-Jewish person. So the Talmud says if a Jewish person and a non-Jewish person are ascending an incline or descending a decline, the Jewish person should not be positioned below while the non-Jewish person is above. So the non-Jewish person will not have the advantage of height if he decides to attack. Rather, the Jew should be located above while the Gentile is below, and the Jew should not bend down before him, lest the Gentile break his skull. I don't know if this sounds like you going for a walk in your neighborhood, but this is not the world that many of us live in on a daily basis. But I do think in the contemporary moment we're living in, this 21st century, year 2025, I bet you there's some people who live with that kind of fear because they're maybe a very, very small minority in a larger community. But if you just think about what does this say about our ancestors and how they related, a non-Jewish person was inherently suspicious. They could harm you. So you actually don't want to give them the advantage if you're walking with them to be lower because that could lead to your being attacked. I'm not suggesting that all of us should adopt such a mindset and an awareness, but I do think it's very, very typical in many of the ancient texts to have that kind of fear of those outside of our circle of community and of peoplehood. So if that were the only thing I would bring in, you'd want your money back and say, Jacobs, what were you thinking? This is not like inspiring. This is painful. But we're not going to stop there. That's actually one of the biblical pieces. Let's take the fear and see it move to care. So this is there are many different examples of this. And this is from the Tosefta, which is kind of about a 2,000-year-old. It's a series of teachings that didn't make it into the final canon. but they're still really important, so they get grouped into something called the Tosefta. So this is a beautiful frame. It says, in a city that contains Jewish people and non-Jewish people, communal officials collect charitable funds from Jews and Christians for the sake of mipnei darkei shalom. This is the quintessential idea that we do some things in community so we can actually create more harmonious, peaceful relations with our neighbors, right? Next example, non-Jewish poor are supported along with Jewish poor. Why? Mipnei darkei shalom, for the sake of the ways of peace. And non-Jewish dead are buried and mourned for the sake of the ways of peace, and Gentile mourners are comforted for the sake of mipnei darkei shalom. Well, this sounds a lot better than the first one, doesn't it? It sounds like we have a real opportunity and obligation to make people who are not Jewish who live in our community part of our sphere of responsibility. We have to collect tzedakah from everyone, and therefore we can distribute it also to everyone. And I think these are really concrete examples. Some people would say, do I have to make a Shiva call to pay a condolence call to someone in my community who's not Jewish? Well, I think for most of us on the Zoom tonight, that would be like, of course you do. Relationship breeds responsibility. This is a 2,000-year-old text reminding us that even for our ancestors, the circle of responsibility did not end with the Jewish people. It extended, and care and love and kindness were to be a part of that. So you see the progression from fear to care, and then we're going to take a humongous leap to the third of these three, and that is relating to religious non-Jews, not with fear, not with kindness alone, but treat them as equals. Now, this is the remarkable teaching of a man named Menachem HaMeiri. And he wrote a commentary on the whole Talmud. He introduces something. Look at his dates. I mean, the guy, he's 1249 to 1306 of the Common Era. So he's almost 1,000 years ago. He has this idea that people of other faiths are not idolaters, but if they are people who have a religious worldview, especially Christians, he was really speaking about Christians, he included them as people of shared faith, and therefore you are to treat them equally as you would treat members of your own people. And he has this category called Gedur Bidar Berdchei Hadat. These are people whose religious practice makes them people who are our peers. And he transforms other into community. Now, not everybody who was alive then or followed after him would have accepted this, but he broke out of those categories of fear and care and wanted radical equality, and sees that in many different texts in his commentary. I don't know about you, I want to be a follower of the Meiri. I think this man already pushed our ancestors outside the bounds of what was comfortable, and I think we should get pushed in that very same way today. All right, I'm gonna just give us a little bit of, if you didn't get a little bit of the book of Ruth, you would want your money back and you deserve to get it back. So Ruth, remember, is a Moabite. So we see in the book of Ruth, half the time she's called Ruth the Moabite, and sometimes she's called sister-in-law, sometimes she's called daughter-in-law. And these are like with Jethro, ways to see her not from outside, but pulling her inside. And her story is well known to all of us, particularly those of us who've chosen to become Jewish. We know this story, and we are all trying to live this kind of incredible devotion. But she starts off with an intermarriage as a Moabite, and then comes to be not just a part of us, but I would argue the best part of us. So some pretty remarkable teachings. what you may not know, the Sefaria, which is this great source of all Jewish texts, they now have our Reform movement's women's commentary on their site. So you're reading along, they got, Maimonides, they've got Rashi, and then they've got the women's Torah commentary and this beautiful teaching from Tamar Ashkenazi. She's a longtime professor of Bible at HUC in Los Angeles. So she points out that in the text, it says the hold on, let me just pull this out. There's this whole notion of returning into the sort of the prior inner circle of kindness. So she sees that transformation. This is a comment from the Kedoshim text. And then the Tsena Arena, which is this kind of wonderful Yiddish women's commentary, has the notion that in the text of Ruth, the word return is written 3 times. It says when a person wishes to convert, one should dissuade them 3 times and to test to see if they're really serious. I don't know about any of my rabbinic colleagues, cantorial colleagues who are on here. I rebelled completely. This made no sense to me. I remember when I was a baby rabbi 100 years ago, I would get a pink slip that said that somebody was interested in conversion. Like I ran to call that person. I like make them call back 3 times, treat them badly and see if they really want to be in. Well, it seems like nonsense, but that is the halacha. And when someone like Ruth came along, I don't want to give her anything other than a feeling of we would love to have you become part of our community, either as a sojourner or maybe as a person who actually would take the full transformation. I'm not giving this talk all about intermarriage, but it's important to know that Ruth intermarries without converting. That's in this story. So everybody, very traditional, who loves this book of Ruth, loves Ruth, you got to just name it. Our community could do even better welcoming all of our interfaith families into Jewish life and to see those as Jewish journeys and the Jewishly adjacent. And I just think this story is about as good as it gets. So the second paragraph is literally maybe the most famous line in biblical literature. Naomi's telling her, you got to go back, be with your people. I don't have any more sons to give you. And Ruth says, it just like it echoes through the centuries, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. And where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. It's just the quintessential expression of attaching, cleaving ourselves to not only another person but a community. And so sometimes strangers, even intractable enemies, become, as in the move of Jethro and Ruth, become part of our community and our family in these cases. There's some really tricky parts to the Bible if you pay attention to it. So in Deuteronomy, it says, no Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of the eternal. None of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall ever be admitted in the congregation of the eternal. Do you think the author of Deuteronomy had never read the book of Ruth? I mean, like it is so in your face. So the rabbis 2,000 years ago, they read the book of Ruth and they knew the Deuteronomy text and they said, we got to fix this. So they made a partial fix. I don't think it does the whole job, but they said in Mishnah Yevamot, they said it only actually means the Moabite males. So marriage to a Moabite woman like Ruth, that's okay. Well, I love these rabbis. If the tradition is wrong, fix it. I wish we had more traditional rabbis who could see something as broken and fix it today. But I think we tend to be very frozen to accept this. So here they see the disjuncture between a biblical teaching and another biblical teaching, and they're going to say there's a way around this. And with Ruth, they find that way. I think if they use the same ingenuity, they could have found their way around it for all of the So this is a beautiful teaching that takes us a little bit further. I'm just gonna say on your own, go back and look at the book of Ruth, particularly the second chapter, when she's out gleaning in the field, which of course is a Shavuot image. And she works with this man, Boaz, who turns out to be a redeemer of hers. And not only does he take notice of her, he just sees the kindness in this woman. And Naomi says, well, to Ruth, he's related to us. He's one of our redeeming kinsmen. And so even though it's mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, the bottom line says Ruth the Moabite. So she's still identified. And I bristle when people say, oh, so-and-so's a convert. Once someone chooses Judaism, they're not a convert. They're a full member of the Jewish people. My mind even thinks they're ahead of the ones who were simply born into the Jewish people. But there's a push and a pull in the book of Ruth about how even to refer to her. But every piece of it inspires. All right, I'm going to make sure we apply this to a world that we live in. So can we take a leap into the last few months? Pope Francis was and remains one of the most inspirational religious figures to me. He held a retreat at the Vatican about 8 years ago on migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, and invited people, religious leaders from around the world. And you knew that this lived inside this man. This was not something he said to his staff, I think we should do this. This was him. And I had a chance to sit one-on-one with him. And therefore, a few weeks ago, before he died, he sent out this letter, which has an official quality to all of the bishops of the United States in response to our current president. And he says, I have followed closely the major crisis taking place in the United States with the initiation of a program of mass deportations. The rightly formed conscience cannot fail to make a critical judgment and express its disagreement with any measure that tacitly or explicitly identifies the illegal status of some migrants with criminality. He says, obviously, keeping countries safe, that's a good thing. But he is offended, religiously offended, by demonizing migrants, refugees, asylum seekers. And he held that position to the day he died. And I want, as we talk about this journey from stranger to more intimate community, that's obviously not only how the Jewish tradition sees our relationship to the stranger, but obviously Pope Francis, and I hope the new Pope will also carry that. We have every indication that he is from the Francis school of Catholic leadership. We hope that that is something that grows. A couple of weeks ago, I was honored to be at Temple Emmanuel in New York City. They were celebrating their 180th anniversary. It's a pretty good anniversary, right? I've been around a while. So I was asked to process into that beautiful, majestic sanctuary with Cardinal Dolan, who's here in New York City. This was before Pope Francis dies. We talked about Pope Francis. And then I thanked him because in New York City, Cardinal Dolan has been remarkably attentive to the Jewish community before October 7th and after. So I thanked him. And he said, well, how could I not stand with the Jewish people after the history of our church and our church's relationship to the Jews? Well, I said, I appreciate that it's so clear to you, but I think there are a few people who are able to not feel that closeness. So thank you. I just think, this idea that people of other faiths are somehow apart from us doesn't mean we're all of the same faith or the same convictions. But I think this idea that we can build more commonality with individuals, but also with wider communities is not only possible, it's necessary. It is also how we keep our communities safe and secure. So I'm going to just take us through a couple of more that are going to, I think, really push us. Because I don't want to end on just a nice smiling note. I want to end on really stretching us, myself, all of us. So there's this other line in Deuteronomy that says, you shall not abhor an Egyptian. Why? Because you are a stranger in the land. Well, I don't know about you, but that line doesn't make sense. Of course, I could abhor an Egyptian if I remember what my ancestors experienced in Egypt. I mean, that was horrific. Maybe I could hold a lifelong, and the people can hold an eternal grudge against Egyptians. And you look in the picture, you see Menachem Begin sitting next to Jimmy Carter, sitting next to Anwar Sadat, and you say, Rabbi Jacobs, are you trying to cue us that that is a possibility, that you can go from Anwar Sadat, remember, is the man who led the Yom Kippur War to try and wipe Israel off the map. Here he's sitting signing a peace agreement with Menachem Begin, who had his own, very painful career leading armed resistance, and they are the most intractable enemies. And here, thank you, the late Jimmy Carter brought them not only together, but was able to get them to this. So Rashi has this amazing teaching. He says, no, you actually can't, you can't hate the Egyptian. And he says, okay, the slavery in Egypt was awful, but Egypt also was the place that took in Joseph and was able to save the Jewish people. So don't only hold one moment in the life of a whole people. See it in the arc of history and the many facets of the relationship. So you can't even hold an eternal grudge against the Egyptians. So I would pose, who can we hold an eternal grudge against? Well, I bet you there's some examples that you'd like to give, that there are probably some people alive in the world today that maybe never should get a chance to come into a relationship like Sadat and Begin. I don't think that's our tradition. So let me push a little bit further. This remarkable human, Rachel Goldberg Poland, honestly, she's not a rabbi. She knows more than 100 rabbis together and has led our people through this excruciating 600 plus days of the hostages being in Gaza. And I love this poem that she writes. She writes it early in the process. Her son is still alive. Hirsch is still alive in Gaza. But just hear this. Can I, Rabbi Zecher, are you able to unmute and read this? Because I'm tired of hearing my voice, and I can believe that everybody is really tired of hearing my voice. So if you would read this, just feel what this is doing about transformation. Here's the mother of this hostage, who we now know is a bereaved mother of this hostage. But look at her worldview. Look at how she sees the other in Gaza. Please.
Sure. There is a Yiddish lullaby that says, "Your mother will cry 1,000 tears before you grow to be a man." I have cried 1,000,000 tears in the last 67 days. We all have. And I know, way over there, there is another woman who looks just like me, because we are all so very similar. She has been crying all those tears, our sea of tears. They are all the same. Can we take them, gather them up, and remove the salt, and then pour them over our desert of despair, and plant one tiny seed, a seed wrapped in fear, trauma, pain, and hope, and see what grows? Could it be that this woman, so very much like me, that she and I could be sitting together in 50 years, laughing without teeth because we have drunk so much sweet tea together, and now we are so very old, and our faces are creased like worn-out brown paper bags, and our sons have their own grandchildren and have long lives, one without an arm, but who needs 2 arms anyway? Is it all a dream, a fantasy, a prophecy? One tiny seed.
If you take just one thing from our learning together today, and you take Rachel's poem, it just stretches every soul. I don't imagine every Gazan could utter this. I don't think every Israeli, I don't think every Jewish person, every Christian or Muslim person could, but I think she's demonstrating a way of looking at even the most intractable conflict and seeing a different future. Just extraordinary. This is a peace rally I'm standing with Women Wage Peace on the Gaza border. You may remember back in 2018, there were these balloons that Hamas figured out could be incinerating balloons. So they floated over the border, landed in the field, and burned everything in sight. We're standing on one of those fields. These are Muslim, Jewish, and Christian women. This is a collection of right-wing settler women, Gazans across the border on their cell phones, and Jewish Israelis of the entire spectrum. And Vivian Silver, who was one of the inspirations to Women Wage Peace, was murdered on October 7th. At this gathering, she said, would you say a few words? I said, I would, but I came to hear words and to be here in solidarity. She said, no, it would mean a lot to me if you would say a few words. And so I stood there in this incredible assembly of righteous, devoted peacemakers like Rachel Goldberg Poland. They were not, naive. They understood that this was still a very violent, intractable conflict. But they wanted to stand on the burnt field and imagine a different future. I have trouble going back to that place after all the pain of these last couple of years and thinking, could that be our future? Could that be imagined? Could we move from Midianite, arch enemy to wise, sage family member, Ruth, the Moabites, who were known for their cruelty? Could these journeys actually happen? I want to just pose that's the work. That's the work of Shavuot. That's the work of transformation. I don't have time to tell you this story of Tammy Leviton, who is a resident of Nahal Oz. And she schooled me when I was there in June of 2021, after a real moment of barrages of missiles from Gaza. And I gave a Devar Torah because I was invited to do so. And after I finished, she came up to me and she said, I need to talk to you. And if all my clergy friends know that moment, you know that something you said did not land well. So I said, I'm here. Talk to me. What would you share? She said, you have no idea what it's like to spend 3 weeks in the shelter of this kibbutz with your children and grandchildren. You have no idea. I said, I'm sure I do have no idea. Could you help me understand? She said, do you know what I thought about for 3 weeks when I was in the bomb shelter with my kids and my grandchildren? I said, no, what? She said, all I could think about were the mothers and grandmothers in Gaza who didn't have a bomb shelter to go into. I thought to myself, what is in your soul that you can have that big of a worldview? Well, on October 7th, her daughter and granddaughter were taken hostage. They were released in that first group that came back a month later, remember, in the beginning of November. She is every Saturday night at the hostage square, Havdalah of the Reform Movement, and she has not given up her hope. If Tammy Leviton can hold her hope, what's our excuse? I'm just going to skip over that, and I'm going to end with this image. We're on the first leg of our Tikkun Leil Shavuot. This word Tikkun, we know the word. It means transformation, repair, healing. Why are we learning tonight? Is it just to, do the traditional thing? I submit that learning is not an end in itself. We're here to learn these 25 hours because learning can be an instrument of redemption. It can change us. It can change our community. It can change our world. The very end of the book of Ruth is this miraculous birth. A son is born to Naomi, actually to Ruth, but Naomi gets the joy of that connection. So look at the generations. Ruth gives birth to Obed, to Jesse, to David becomes king, and the Messiah goes through this line. a Moabite enemy becomes a member of our family, and the world is redeemed. I don't know about you, but that's all I need to get all into the spirit of what this learning tonight is about. It's about making us who we could be, making our communities what they could become. It is pretty naive. I know you're probably thinking, what is Jacobs drinking? I mean, does he really think that's the way the world works? I got the way the world works. You do too. And it's excruciating. And yet, this journey of transformation, Jethro, Ruth, each of us, Tammy Leviton, Rachel Goldberg Poland, Vivian Silver, these are the transformational moves that can help us as we go forward. I'm just looking at the chat now. You've probably already come up with much better teaching and all of the inspiration. But one thing I'm going to be true to, because I want to be invited back next year, and Rabbi Zecher and Rabbi Jacobson will say, if you go 1 minute over, Rick, I don't think we can have you back. So I'm going to just say, what a thrill to be learning with you. I wish I was sitting in a room and we could have conversations back and forth. So I apologize. I wasn't able to keep my eyes on the chat as much as I would have liked to. But I hope this learning becomes an instrument of our redemption for all of us and for our world, and let us be changed for the better for our learning tonight together.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Jacobs. This is an amazing way to inaugurate our learning and the way that we see the world and how Torah makes a difference for all of us. So we are really grateful. We're going to hold you to that offer for next year, and we're going to see this as a conversation that keeps going, because I think what we have learned from you and continue to be inspired is really the way that we're regarding one another makes that difference in how we go forward. So Lily,
Amen.
are you gonna, or Rabbi
I
Jacobson?
got it.
Okay.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Jacobs. Let this be the covenant for the rest of our learning. We're not just here because we have nothing else better to do. We're here because studying together changes us, each of us. Ugh, amen. In just a moment, we will be putting up